Julius Malema was denied entry into the United Kingdom and turned back at the South African airport yesterday. The right-wing group Afriforum quickly claimed credit, and the right-wing commentators quickly criticized Julius Malema and the economic freedom fighters for wanting to visit whiteness. But what really happened? There's been a lot of noise. There was a lot of noise, lots of commentary. Some people even encouraged him cheekily to follow his own advice and to use creative means to get into Britain. So let's bring this into the lab. Let's dissect it. Let's splice it. Let's decode this. Let's break it down in this episode of The Dissection. Welcome to this episode. Let's start with the event itself. Where was Julius Malema trying to go? Where was he even going? Let's start there. The Cambridge University Africa Together Conference was established in 2014. It's an annual flagship event that brings together some of the most influential thinkers, leaders, and innovators from across Africa and its diaspora. The conference serves as a platform to challenge conventional narratives, amplify African voices, and envision bold strategies for the continent's future. So, with its blend of academic rigor and dynamic energy, the ATC Africa Together Conference fosters intellectual exchange, leadership development, and meaningful dialogue on critical issues such as governance, development, culture, and innovation. The event features keynote speeches by distinguished leaders, panel discussions with experts from diverse fields, and interactive sessions that encourage participants to contribute their perspective. Beyond the engaging conversations, the ATC creates an inspiring and inclusive atmosphere where connections are made, ideas are born, and collaborations are sparked to address Africa's challenges and harness its opportunities. This is all done prior to the Africa Day, which is when the Organization of African Unity was formed in 1963 on the 25th of May, or rather when the documents were signed on the 25th of May, 1963. So this is where Malema was going. Cambridge University, he was going there. Malema was invited to be part of this conference and to speak in a panel which was titled Future Africa Presidents. Controversial, but that's what it was titled. The event is hosted by the Cambridge Union, which is the University of Cambridge Debating Society. This society currently has over 70,000 live members worldwide. It is one of the oldest debating societies in the world and the largest student society in Cambridge. The university identifies itself as a forum for free speech and public debate. Their mantra is that they have been defending free speech since 1815. There's actually a history in the top UK universities of, cultivating controversial debates and having and hosting controversial speeches. If you look at Oxford Union, Cambridge Union, they have hosted and will continue to host controversial speakers. I think Oxford Union hosted at some point Malcolm X, who was one of the guest speakers at one of their events and had a public debate there. And he was more critical of the white power structure than Julius Malema ever could be. Julius Malema himself has been invited to speak in the United Kingdom on several occasions, including at the Oxford Union. So he's traveled to the UK frequently, and that will have a bearing on some of the stuff we'll discuss later. So what did Julius Malema say about the whole fiasco? Because he brought it to the attention of the world. He said the following: "The British authorities have denied me a visa to London for the Cambridge conference this weekend, providing no substantial justification. It is clear to me that this is an attempt to silence a dissenting political perspective. We are currently at the Oliver Tambo Airport, where we were promised that everything would be sorted by 3:30 p.m. Instead, we received a regret letter just 4 hours before our departure. This is unacceptable and spineless." Then he puts the fist. Amandla! That's what Julius Malema said. So Afriforum didn't waste time jumping in. They didn't waste time. Kali Creel, the leader of Afriforum, jumped in, and this is what he had to say. "Great news! This is only the beginning. Afriforum is intensifying its international campaign, calling on the global community to take punitive action against Julius Malema for inciting violence against Afrikaners and farmers with the Kill the Boer chant." South African courts have failed to protect Afrikaners from calls for violence against them, and the presidency has refused to condemn the hateful chant to ensure that Malema cannot act with impunity. International intervention is now necessary. Afriforum claiming credit, strongly claiming credit. They've taken this issue as their win. And if you are not aware, Afriforum has been the entity that has taken the struggle song Dubula to the courts in South Africa and has argued that the song is hate speech. Various courts have considered this matter and ruled against Afriforum, the last court being the Supreme Court of Appeal. They held that it's not hate speech, it's historic, it's a historic song, and you can go read the judgment. It's quite lengthy and clear on why the court took that position. What's interesting to me and something worth pointing out is that Afriforum actually has taken a contradictory position on struggle symbols, which makes me question their authenticity. They've taken a contradictory position, and I want to tell you why I say so. Because at some point, Afriforum went to court to fight for the right to display the apartheid flag, a symbol of hatred, a symbol of a period where there was an ideology of oppression, repression, subjugation, and white supremacist thinking. They were like, no, can we please display this flag? And we want to have it as part of the history. It's an important flag. They lost that case. So, putting aside the legal reasoning of the court, let's think about the contradiction on their part. The contradiction on their part lies in this. If you in principle believe that historic artifacts, symbols of speech, should be displayed in public as part of free speech, why would you then in principle be opposed to other historic artifacts of other groups being displayed or used in public? Because a song in and of itself is a historic artifact. So there's a contradiction. You can't say, please let me put up the apartheid flag, but you don't sing Tubulipun. How does that work? Where's the logical consistency in that? I think it exposes their hypocrisy and the fact that some of their actions are not genuine. But I must acknowledge this song is divisive and there are strong opinions on both sides. I'm curious, what are your views on the singing of struggle songs in South Africa at this time in history? Let's have a conversation in the comments. Some people think, well, it's 31 years later, why are these songs being sung? Some people think, well, you do need to remember the history. You do need to keep educating young people. Some people think that it doesn't matter. It's part of political expression. People are over-exaggerating the impact and import of these particular songs. Where do you stand? Let's talk in the comment section. I'm always in the comment section reading what you guys have to say and your views, and I'm inviting you here to share with me where do you stand on this song. It's very divisive, and opinions are divided, but the courts have provided a very clear view on where they stand and where South African law stands, that it's not hate speech. And, British authorities would be aware of that. So there was a response. There was communication from the High Commissioner. And I want to tell you what that communication said. The High Commissioner to South Africa wrote a letter to the economic freedom fighters. This is what he said in the letter. I refer to your recent letter regarding the planned visit of the Honorable Julius Malema, President of the Economic Freedom Fighters, to the United Kingdom to speak at Cambridge University's Africa Together conference. I've been following the processing of the necessary visa for Mr. Malema, and I'm writing to personally apologize that colleagues at the UK Home Office have said that they will regrettably be unable to process the application in time, owing to the necessary steps required to consider visa applications and the unfortunate timing of some recent UK bank holidays. I recognize that this will be deeply disappointing, especially as the delegation applied in advance and some paid for priority service. I would like to assure you that I have taken a personal interest in this issue and have been in regular communication with the relevant Home Office officials about this case, including over the last week and this morning. I'm afraid, though, that I have no means of intervening in the decision-making process itself, which is solely a matter for the Home Office. Given the fact that the purpose of the visit was to attend the Cambridge conference, and that will now no longer be possible, it would be open to the delegation to withdraw their applications on this occasion. We have secured agreement from Home Office colleagues that should the delegation choose to do so, the Home Office will fully refund all application fees incurred, including the priority service application. I know that this will mean substantive inconvenience for Mr. Malema and the delegation. I renew my sincere apologies again to them that the Home Office were unable to process the applications in time on this occasion. That's what the the High Commissioner said. And you may be wondering, who the hell is the High Commissioner? Where's the ambassador? Where's the ambassador? Or who is this dude? Well, the High Commissioner is the most senior person commissioned by a government or international organization to perform a specified role. In particular, the highest ranking diplomat among those commissioned to represent one Commonwealth country in another. So effectively, he's operating at the level of the ambassador. The tone from the High Commissioner does not suggest, to me, a political motive to prevent Malema from attending the conference. If there was a political motive, it would be something that would be worrying because Malema meets the criteria of travel to the UK. However, I must say there is one little asterisk that I want to put on what I've just said, and I'll get to that just now. So you need to be aware that admission into a country is not done on arbitrary grounds, although there's sometimes room for discretion on behalf of the immigration official. The decision must be made consistently with the laws and with the regulations. And you need to note that whenever such a decision is taken, the person is entitled to written reasons for that decision if the decision is rejected. So the UK has an Immigration Act of 1971, and it has immigration rules which give clear indications for the process of application. You cannot have an arbitrary or random process for these things. In general, you need laws of general application. You need that the administrative actions are taken consistently and taken in a manner that allows for predictability and allows for tourists and business travelers to be able to have some certainty about whether or not they have prospects. You can't just have a Mickey Mouse arrangement, right? And the UK is not having a Mickey Mouse arrangement either. So what does the UK law say about refusal? A person may also have their entry clearance or permission cancelled on suitability grounds. More than one grounds for refusal or cancellation may apply. The Immigration Act of 1971, Section 76 of the Nationality, Immigration and Asylum Act of 2002, the Immigration Order 2000 and Schedule 2 of the Immigration Act of 1971 set out the powers to cancel entry clearance or permission. These rules set out how those powers are to be exercised. 9.2.2 says, entry clearance or permission held by a person must be cancelled where the Secretary of State has personally directed that the person be excluded from the UK. 9.2.3 an application for entry clearance must be refused where the applicant is an excluded person, as defined by Section 8B.4 of the Immigration Act. Then there's this section which deals with non-conducive grounds. 9.3.1 an application for entry clearance, permission to enter, or permission to stay must be refused where the applicant's presence in the UK is not conducive to the public good because of their conduct, character, association, or other reasons. 9.3.2 entry clearance or permission held by a person must be cancelled where the person's presence in the UK is not conducive to the public good. So we can see that there are rules which dictate this. Either the person has had their suitability rejected because the Secretary of State personally made that direction, or that person is deemed to be excluded as per Section 8B.4 of the Immigration Act, or that person is deemed to not be conducive to the public good because of their conduct, character, associations, right? But that would have to be communicated to the particular person. Now, there may be an argument made by Afriforum and others that, listen, Julius Malema is not somebody who is in the public good or somebody who is not conducive to the public good because of his radical left-wing politics. That could be an argument that would be made. I'm not particularly sure the Labour Party, which leans to the left, would be inclined to take that position. However, on the basis of maybe some of the issues of race and the fact that the UK is predominantly still a white population, there may be considerations in that respect that no, this guy's presence is not conducive to the public good. However, if that was the decision, it would have to be communicated. Let's apply the understanding of the rules as they exist to Julius Malema's case. Malema's case is such that he's a high-profile South African. He's an elected representative, public representative, a member of parliament. He earns more than 100,000 rands a month gross salary, and he has a family and property in South Africa. Those are reasons why he is likely to return to South Africa, right? Because he wants to continue with his political career and contest in elections, etc., etc. He has clear reasons for a stay in the UK. He was invited by a top university, Cambridge, I think is number 2, to address an Africa Day conference by the Cambridge Union, which is a well-known, well-established, one of the oldest entities in the United Kingdom. So he has income, he has means, he has the financial resources to stay in the UK. As such, the considerations of him disappearing and working in the UK as a cleaner or gardener or somewhere would be preposterous or a stretch of the imagination, right? He has previously traveled to the UK and did not overstay. And this is something that would strengthen an applicant's case when discretionary decisions are being made at the Home Office, right? He has no criminal record in South Africa. So those things are all things which actually lean and suggest that he should be accepted. If there was something done behind the scenes, I don't think that the UK Home Office would be in a position right now to admit that. If there was an official who saw that and maybe watched his YouTube videos, was like, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to approve this guy on time, then that's something that maybe even does need an investigation, and maybe an investigation will be done because Malema face value meets the criteria. If your visa is refused, you have to receive a written refusal notice explaining the specific paragraphs of the immigration rules under which the decision was made, your appeal rights, if any, whether you can request an administrative review, and this applies to certain visa types. It does not appear that Julius Malema was furnished with reasons. There is a curiosity to this case that I want to point out, is that the bank holidays, man, I don't understand if the bank holidays were going to be that significant to delaying the application, right? Because there were only 2 bank holidays in April, the 3rd of April and the 6th of April. Those were the Easter bank holidays. And only 1 bank holiday in May, being the 4th of May. So unless the South African side also took other holidays, then that would make sense. Also, why do they not have a skeleton staff for emergencies of this nature? Because this is a prominent event at a prominent university with high-profile panels, with ministers, government officials from Africa, etc. I even saw some interesting names there of other high-profile figures who will be attending that. So there has to be some kind of a skeleton stuff. My question also is like, what's the point of paying for the priority processing when all the people in the processing center are going to go on bank holidays and all of that stuff? So I do have a question mark. I'm not fully convinced by the contrite apology offered by the High Commissioner. I think that something behind the scenes could have happened, but it's something that they can't necessarily legally admit to because it would not meet the master of legal scrutiny, because they would have to explicitly say, this is why we rejected you. And if it's on those conducive grounds, being conducive for public good grounds, they would be in a lot of political higi-haga and krinkam-crankam on those grounds because, you know, free speech is a protected right in the UK. It can be limited on certain instances, but they would then have to make all of those arguments in public, in court, etc., which I don't think the Labour government particularly wants to do, but the people who did it at the Home Office may not necessarily be people who are on the left and may actually be hardcore conservatives who believe in the politics of Nigel Farage, etc. The UK actually is not always pristine as a government, and There's been lots of corruption scandal. I think there was at some point a post office scandal there. Lots of scandals that they've had to pay people compensation for over time. If I was the EFF, I would look into this issue further. If I was the Parliament of South Africa, I would actually look into this issue further, because there's something that is significant to note about the UK saying to an elected representative of South Africa that, we can just say no to you, especially somebody who holds an official passport, which is a more serious passport than an ordinary passport, in between a diplomatic passport and just the ordinary one that everyone gets. There's something to this that I think does need a higher level of examination. DECO needs to get involved. There needs to be some pushback from the South African government on this, because then they can start doing that to ANC leaders, etc., etc. And it's a form of shadow sanctions if there's a decision being made at the Home Office that certain South African politicians will not be allowed because of their political views. It's kind of like trying to then send a message to South African politicians that you need to make your politics align with the UK, align with America, align with the EU if you want to travel to the EU. I think that's problematic if those politics do not necessarily result in the kind of actions that Robert Mugabe was taking part in, where there is real violation of human rights on the ground, etc., etc. South Africa is a constitutional democracy. So when you begin to then say South Africans who have espoused things you disagree with can't travel to your country, that becomes a problem. So I think this needs to be looked into. It does need to be looked into. From all of this, it looks like Afriforum was claiming a victory of their influence where no such victory exists on the facts as we currently know them. There is a bigger question, though. There is a bigger question. Why does the UK exclude South Africa from its fast-track visa programs? In fact, why do African nations bend over backwards to accommodate travelers from the UK, the EU, the USA, and we have to go through the eye of the needle and pay through the nose to actually visit those particular places and still spend our money there? That does not seem to me to be in line with equality. It does not seem to me to be in line with us treating each other as equals on the global stage. Let me tell you something. The UK has an electronic travel authorization system, ETA, but it's narrowly restricted to a few groups. But this ETA is a digital pre-travel clearance system. It was initiated by the UK government to enhance border security and to streamline entry procedures. Fine, I understand the dynamics for why they did that in the way that they did, but it shows that they can create digital interventions to fast-track, visa applications. Why do they not create an electronic visa system for more countries in Africa? I've traveled to Ethiopia and they have this advanced visa application process, which can be done on your laptop. Many other countries have this. The UK is an advanced country. They have the resources. The UK and other Western nations, the EU, the Schengen visa, you will have to sacrifice your child on the mountain to actually be able to get that Schengen visa as a typical African. They want to give it to the cream of the crop, the elite of the elites. That to me is just bizarre, discriminatory. You guys, when you came to Africa to take all of our mineral resources, to put us in slavery, you just showed up on boats. Took gold, took people, took all of this stuff. And you are still having the haughty attitude to treat us as if on the global stage we are inferior. And then when you want us to support your position on NATO or the war in Ukraine, now African countries must run. Then when you want us to go green and, start using green energy and join the IPPs, now African nations must run. I actually think that African leaders need to actually look at these moments. Remember when they went to the Queen's funeral, they were put in a bus somewhere and then they were treated just like povos. Same with the Pope's funeral. The African leaders were just in a little huddle there, looking insignificant. Treat yourselves better, respect yourselves. This begging bowl mentality that you have, African leaders, has made them look down on you when you're sitting on vast wealth. Even if you are poor, even if you are not in a position of advantage, you don't allow rich people to trample all over you as if you don't have dignity and gravitas in your own way. You guys have really lost the plot. We all know respectable families in the townships, in the rural areas, where those families didn't have means, but because they had moral fiber, they could still speak with authority on the global stage. You guys, you African leaders, you've really dropped the ball. These Western nations need to be called out for this holier-than-thou attitude that they have to African tourists and visitors. They really behave in a funny way. That is unacceptable. But guys, that's what's happening with this Malema situation. What do you think? Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'm going to meet you there.